Hi, welcome. I'm John, one of the co-owners and co-directors here at Cove Street Arts, and just off camera here we have Kelly, the other co-owner and co-director. Welcome to our latest online event. We are happy to have with us tonight Wes LaFountain, the curator of our STEAM exhibition. First, just a few words about our format. Wes is going to take us on a tour of the exhibition, and then there will be time for questions afterwards. So to ask a question, just type it into the comment section on Facebook on the talk. Just a word of warning, there's about a minute delay between us here in the gallery and the live stream. So if everyone waits until the end to post their comments or questions, we may miss some. So just whenever they occur to you, go ahead and type them in, and then we will read them here at the gallery to Wes when it's time for the questions. I assume most of you are already familiar with Wes, as he's been a long-time curator, writer, and art educator in northern New England. He's curated or been a juror for countless shows in the area. Most recently, he's been a guest curator and writer at Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire after serving as the interim director of their gallery. He was also the interim director of the University of New Hampshire Museum of Art, as well as an associate director of development for the College of Liberal Arts there. Wes was also the first executive director of the Woodman Institute Museum in Dover, New Hampshire. And prior to that, he worked at the Portland Museum of Art as the education outreach coordinator. And of course, closest to our art, Wes worked at Greenhut Galleries. We were very eager to have Wes curate a show here, and we're so excited when he proposed the STEAM exhibition, adding the arts to STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The show is unlike any we have done before, and we are absolutely thrilled with the result. Thank you, Wes, and we are really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the exhibition.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you, Kelly. It's a great pleasure to be here. And halfway through the installation, I don't think they would have been quite as complimentary about this particular installation. But yeah, we're very happy with it. I'm very pleased with it. It's actually an exhibition that's sort of been on my mind for more years than I care to admit. Way back in the late 20th century, when STEM education became a thing, I was working at the Portland Museum of Art in the education department and wondering what this STEM was about and where the heck were the arts. So really, it was sort of all these years and wondering how I could engage with the idea. What would an exhibition look like? I had no idea. I had no idea who would be in it. But now that it's up on the walls, we do. I have assembled a group of 7 artists. All of them, interestingly enough, have pretty close connections with the world other than the art world. We have artists who have been engaged with mechanical engineering, music, forestry. It's been a great sort of discovery to find out from the artists whose work I was admiring, to find out their own backgrounds. And that's a little bit about what this exhibition is about, but really what it's about is, you know, STEM in and of itself is a great tool, but nobody lives in those sort of ivory towers, and creativity certainly doesn't pay any attention to ivory towers. So it was a great joy to be able to take on this challenge and this opportunity to put this show together. So let's talk about some art, or as we say in northern New England, let's talk art. Behind me, not sure how visible it is a work by Fore Vandeveld, who teaches at the School of Fine Arts at Tufts University in Boston. And Fore works pretty intimately with STEM teaching within the art context. She's about light, space, and the interactions of humans within that context. And the work behind us is called Wall Score for Rhombi. Rhombi is, as you mathematicians and students of Greek may know, is plural for rhombus. Rhombus is a parallelogram of 4 equal sides. And what The artist has created for us here the screen on which this digital content is screening is actually a series of rhombi. They're pyramidal in shape, and while the hand, to all of these artists, the hand is as important as whatever science, technology, and engineering and mathematics may have gone into the equation of creating this work. And I will say that it was at times painful to watch Fore create the screen for this particular piece, which again, being concerned with light and space, she created a piece that is a very textured screen. She didn't want a flat screen. It wasn't so much about the image, it was about how the image interacts with the space, with the screen itself. So it's a very textured, again, group of pyramids that are on the wall here, and she created each one of those pyramids while she was here out of a flat piece of foam core. And it took essentially the 2 days of the installation, she was making pyramids. So it's as with a lot of art, it's a love-hate thing. I'm sure she wasn't real pleased to be doing it, except for the higher purpose that it created for her. So we're looking at one of her pieces here, and I want to move over to another piece right now over this way. This is a piece by Vandeveld, again, same artist, called Vibrant Divide. It's a fairly simple, straightforward installation, 4 sheets of plexiglass, orange plexiglass, lit by black light, surrounded by dark. She's interested in immersive experiences with light and color. And here, I have to say, this was one of the first pieces that when I saw it in photographs, I saw it in a magazine, Artscope magazine was reviewing an exhibition of Fore's somewhere in New Hampshire, and I saw a picture of this piece and I decided, I've got to have that piece in this show. And it's one of the first pieces I really went after. I just find it remarkable in its simplicity and in its depth in terms of color, space, relationships, the very things that she's concerned with. It's all right here, and it's fairly dramatic in the sense that if you can see, for instance, the border, the edge that is so brightly lit for you art historian people, the zips of Barnett Newman when he painted these quick dashes of thin lines down the surface of his abstract paintings. I saw that here, that excited me. The scoring that's been done, the etching essentially that's been done on the plexiglass, the black lights, how they interact, and the fact that we were able to create the dark space around it really put the task to the preparators. And I want to give a big shout out to Roy German and Dean McCaslin for just doing a heck of a job on this. This was, I think, something that almost broke the camel's back in terms of how it was going to be put together, how it was going to be hung. We are in essentially a small part of the storage area of the gallery. This is not generally public space, but the owners, John and Kelly, were very generous about how we wanted to lay the show out, and they encouraged us to go ahead with this, and I can't imagine it being shown any better than what we're seeing here today. So I love this piece. It suits what the artist's goals are very well, and I'm really happy to be able to share it with the public. I find it a very exciting piece. Okay, we're going to move down the hall this way, and introduce another artist, an artist who I first met at Green Hut Galleries when I worked there, and whose work I've really appreciated from the perspective of one. Tom has a background in mechanical engineering. I kind of see Tom, he's fun to be around, but he's a very deep thinker. He likes to set problems and solve them. And what he's done here, as he's done with a lot of his work over the years, is include LED lights in a lot of his compositions. He did a whole series of musical fret series where he was laying out in sequential pattern, timed, so that different chords would show up across the surface of his painting. Here, in this case, if you're from the Portland area, you might recognize the back Cove area. This is a very fairly literal transcription of an experience he had. In fact, the title is very specific. It's 135 Sheridan Street here in Portland. And he was out there around dusk and was taken with the traffic on 295, the tail lights, the lights on the radio towers, and it was something that he wanted to experiment with. You may notice that the lights flash on and off. And he just sort of, as a sort of scientist, has it all kind of figured out as to how he wants to portray this. It was nice in the sense that he wanted to give the sense of a particular landscape. It is a specific landscape, but he didn't want the painting of that landscape to sort of supersede the overall design of the light patterns that he was most interested in. So I really think this was a very successful piece. I saw it, I think, about a year ago in his studio, and just really liked it immediately for what he was trying to do and for what he accomplished. Moving to a couple other works by Tom, there's one a little further down, very similar to this in principle, where it's all about principles of emotional states of being. He was referring at the time to principles of Scientology, where they sort of lay out an inventory or a roster of states of being, emotional conditions, how one feels at any given time. And these are digital readouts that are timed to change. And I don't know what the time interval is, but right now I'm looking at serenity of being up here, games and action down here, enthusiasm and cheerfulness. We're in the positive part of that chart. It sort of runs the gamut from the real positive things to the negative things. And what I like about this work is it kind of does what a landscape painting does. You bring to a landscape painting your mood. The landscape painting can either sort of reinforce that mood, change that mood, alter it in some way, or not, depending on your own mood. But there's an image with which you can work. Here you're working with words, with concepts, but they're really kind of after the same thing. What are you relating to on this particular scale? What do you relate to in a painting? The questions he asked here just really intrigued me, and I was very happy to get these works included in this exhibition, so I thank Tom for that. We're now going to move back down this wall to a video work. I mean, this is science, technology, engineering, and math. We have to have video, right? So, this is a lovely video by Jan Pirabek, who teaches at the University of Southern Maine. And she created this piece, and initially this is called Arctic Dream. And this was initially created for a narrative storyline, which was a longer video, which was shown at the Center for Maine Contemporary Art some time ago. In this case, she wanted to remove this image, have it be kind of a standalone, and I say image, it's not a photograph. As you can see, it's animation, it's moving. But she wanted to present in a little more calm way, kind of a snapshot of this particular landscape scenario. The narrative storyline that she had for her other video was about Arctic exploration, environmental change, that type of thing. Here, it's meant to be non-narrative. It's meant to be more kind of a snapshot of the iceberg, the water that you can see moving. She had some help with this. Actually, John, could we get the music on for this? Thank you. Jan worked with a couple of people, Jordan Curley, who's another digital content developer, and Frank Musseri, who is a composer and sound artist, teaches at Bowdoin, and they collaborated on this piece, and they wanted to give a sense of water, wind, an Arctic environment, and I think besides being beautiful, it's rather compelling. And I was thinking today, if I were living on a tropical island on a really hot, muggy day, I'd like to have this where I could just sit down and experience it and maybe cool down a little bit. But I'm very pleased that Jan was able to loan us this piece for this exhibition. I think it's, again, much more than a photograph. It doesn't represent a specific place. It's more about idea of place. And the topic of climate change certainly comes to mind in this, although again, no narrative storyline to it, but a beautiful piece. Okay, we're going to move across the way. This exhibition takes up two of the large galleries at Cove Street, and I just want to give a shout out to them in that at any given time there are 3 or 4 exhibitions going on here. The space is that big. I have all the room I want for this exhibition, and there are 3 other exhibitions in other galleries adjacent to this. So it's a wonderful space, a lot going on. It seems like there's always something either coming in or going out. And I'm thrilled to be here for this. Okay, so another artist, Elizabeth Bush, artist in the Bangor area. She's been an artist pretty much all her life. She's been a quilter since 1983. These are quilts that she has done. One of them is titled Spring. One of them is titled Summer. So I'm going to give you a minute to look at them. Think about which one might be titled which. And then can I have a show of hands of all of you who think the one on the left is spring? No, just kidding. Put your hands down. Yes, spring on the left, summer on the right. Elizabeth, and the whole notion of quilting in this exhibition, I have to say, I want to sort of talk about the creation story of how a couple of the mediums that are in the show got here, one of which is quilts. As I was putting the show together, as I mentioned, I knew I wanted the fore Vandeveld piece. It was just so striking. And it's very high tech, and what we've seen, some of what we've seen has been pretty high tech thus far, and I thought, if I'm not careful, I'm going to have an exhibition that's all flashing lights and bells and whistles, and I didn't want that. So I needed to find some high touch to balance the high tech. And at that time, I had a conversation with a good friend of mine, Carol Thibodeau. Carol, if you're watching, big shout out to you and Omer. Carol, besides being a recently retired excellent pediatric nurse, is a craftsperson. And she got into a conversation with me about quilting. She was working on a quilt. It was a very intricate design, the intricate pattern, and she was talking about how the math in this pattern was driving her crazy. And I'm listening, thinking, okay, this is going to work. So from there, I took that idea, and thanks to the Maine Crafts Association website, I was able to peruse a variety of a whole bunch of craftspeople, excellent craftspeople. But I was taken by the work of Elizabeth because her quilts, they're referred to as art quilts, and in her case, what that means is she paints on fabric and then includes that painting in her quilt making. So as she has described it, it's kind of a twofer in that she works at arm's length creating the painting, and then later during the quilting process works again from a much more intimate detail level and incorporating that painting into her quilt. So I think it's a very successful idea. I love the idea. She's wonderful at color sense, warm tones, cool tones. She loves to sort of play with that, and she likes to do it in a way that is free from being too detail-oriented. She likes to talk about having a conversation with the piece as she's creating it. And there are a couple other pieces that we're going to get to a little bit later, but I was thrilled to be able to exhibit these pieces. I visited her studio quite a while ago. Interestingly enough, in this pandemic era, doing studio visits has become pretty much impossible or unlikely. But I went up and visited her. She has a wonderful studio, lots of work, and it just was a great experience to be able to sit and talk with her, as it is with most studio visits, some of the best part of this job. But getting to know her a little bit, getting to know her story, she incorporates a lot of her own personal story into her work, and I think that'll become more obvious as we see a couple of her other pieces back there. But this was about high touch. The tech, a needle. a sewing needle. So we're getting into material that is not high-tech per se. We're going to move into another area that one might argue is even less high-tech, very much high-touch, and that is native basketry. Again, I was looking for the connection of the balance between the high-tech and the high-touch. I have the good fortune of coming up in a family. I had a grandfather who was a Maliseet Indian, who was a basket maker. When I was in college, I helped him make a few baskets, a couple of baskets, and had the occasion to go out into the woods with him. He used to go just sort of look at the general terrain of an area, find a stand of brown ash trees, which is what he specifically was using, and would go to the owner of the land, ask permission, take down a couple of trees, and we'd take them down. And they'd be roughly a 6-foot stick, as they're called. And what I've done here is try to present a little bit of the process of how you get from this to any of these, And I want to give a shout out to my nephew who works on the reservation, the Maliseet Reservation up in Holton, the Holton Band of Maliseet Indians. Went up and visited him. We looked at work. He introduced me to Chris Bob, who's in these photographs here, demonstrating how some of this would turn into baskets. I was able to procure some samples of how the wood is pounded to separate the grains, how you pull those splints apart and end up with pieces like this that you can build around a mold and end up with something as beautiful as this. So I tried to put the whole process here. In the process of that, while I was up there, I met the chief. She was a beautifully gracious woman. And she gave me that gift of sweetgrass. I wish you could smell it. So that sort of set the stage for what I'm doing here. Brian Reynolds up at the, who works at the reservation up in Holton. I went up and visited him. We selected work. He located an artist, Bill Toma. All of these baskets are by Bill. All of the unfinished baskets are by Bill. The finished works are by Fred Toma, Bill's nephew. Fred has work in the Smithsonian Institution. He's just a fabulous craftsman. And some of these baskets, all the colored baskets that are in this exhibition were by Fred. And he actually developed, he did some research and found out that the Katahdin Arctic butterfly is, I don't think it's extinct yet, is indigenous to the Katahdin region, and that's it. It doesn't exist anywhere else. So he adopted that as a motif and designed this particular motif for it. On the top, he very delicately cut out little chips of ash in the shape of a butterfly. So these are his Katahdin Arctic butterfly baskets. These colorful pieces are, unfortunately, none of these are for sale. They're all on loan to this gallery from the Maliseet Tribal Museum. And I just want to commend John and Kelly for letting me bring in work that's not for sale. But I just had to show off the quality of this particular artist. Fred was one of the founding members of the Maine Indian Basket Makers Alliance, which is an ongoing concern today, an active one, although the brown ash, I must say, which is the staple for these, is undergoing a bit of a threat from infestation. I believe it's called the brown ash borer. I'm not sure. I think it's a beetle which basically feeds on the brown ash tree and is making this material harder to find and harder to use. So I'm not, I don't know where that's going to lead, but for right now, I was just so happy that Bill had an inventory. One thing that I was finding out was that the makers seem to be making less for inventory and more for particular uses or orders. But Bill was kind enough to send down a bunch of baskets. Brian, who helped me, who actually located Bill for this exhibition, brought them down from Holton, and we've got them on display A lot of them have sold, but just thrilled to be able to tell this story of the high-tech version of art making and how it was created. You know, this sort of allows us a bit of a time travel in that, hundreds of years ago, high-tech was a steel axe head. High-tech was a steel knife blade. Common elements today, but here again, I was able to bring down some of the tools, draw shave, which strips the bark off the tree. This particular knife blade here, which is made to scrape and has a beautiful thumb holder right there, is made by my grandfather for specifically that purpose. I mean, he made his tools to fit his hand, and I'm just so pleased to be able to share this stuff. So, very much high touch, photographs that, again, give you a sense of how it all works, how that all works. Fred Thoma baskets. Here's a Katahdin basket with a butterfly on top. A Katahdin Arctic butterfly basket with lid. And just really happy to be able to show this work. So that, I think, finishes every work in this particular, oh no, we're gonna move over, thank you. We're gonna move over to and introduce the work of an artist here and then move around and still talk about Kim's work. Kim Bernard. Probably one of the most out-of-the-box thinkers that I know of. Really hard to pin down labels for her. She's just wonderfully creative, engaging artist who works in multimedia, does wonderful projects, thought-provoking. She's a mentor to artists. She exhibits in art galleries. She exhibits in science museums. And in this particular case, she crocheted. And I don't know if any of you have ever worked with rubber before, but this is, and she's very interested in recycling. And these are recycled bicycle inner tubes that she has crocheted into a variety of shapes. For those of you who received the postcard for this exhibition, you might recognize this piece here. That was on the card. She calls this her hyperbolic series. And given how she talked about working, how difficult it was to work with this medium, she might not revisit this medium, but it wouldn't surprise me if she did. But she's concerned about the environment. She has been an artist in residence in the physics department at Harvard. She did the same artist in residency type program at the University of New England here in Maine. And she's just a wonderful free thinker. If we were not in a pandemic world, we would have her here at some point during the exhibition doing workshops, demonstrations. She has a project called the Pendulum Project, which she is suspended in a harness and essentially is attached to the pendulum, has a canvas on the ground, and drips paint as she is moving through the air. She gets spun in a particular configuration, and the trail of her configuration is translated as she drips paint onto the canvas below. And it's stuff like that. It's just like, who would have thought of that? But that is so cool. We're starting here with Kim. We're going to move around the corner, look at a couple other pieces by Kim. I want to talk about her interest in the environment and her care for it. And I'm going to squeeze by you here. And we're going to talk about a couple pieces over here. This is a piece called Boing. See if you can tell me why. Springs and recycled plastic. She's very interested, as I say, in recycling, to the point where she actually has invented a machine called a pump. And I'm going to have to get my wording right, which I can't find. It's an upcycler. It's a portable upcycler for manipulating plastic, and I can't believe I'm losing those words, but basically this is recycled plastic that she has managed to collect. Her machine sort of chews it up, spits it out as extruding art making material. It's very new. If this exhibition had gone on as scheduled, it was originally scheduled for June. It's been postponed a couple times, opened in September. If we had opened on time, the machine would not have been ready yet. So as it turns out, this is a blessing in that she finished the machine, and all of this work, if you can imagine, if you think of a plastic gallon of milk, that container of milk, that plastic, I asked her, you know, how many recycled things are we looking at here? And I think a piece about this size would represent 1 plastic gallon of water or milk, what have you. So she's able to feel good about being able to use art materials, and this was a concern of hers, that a lot of art materials are not recyclable. And as the rest of the world is sort of moving that way, she wanted to do the same. So she went out and invented a machine that recycles material, allows her to create with it. The title of this piece is, I want to get it right, The Shape of Things to Come, and which is exactly what this is. But it's a wonderful installation. You can see that she's able to manipulate color, and it's only a question of how far can she go with what she's got going. But this is sort of the beginning of using that pump to create art. I can't wait to see what else she does with it. Okay, moving across the hall. I want to thank Reggie for being a great cameraman tonight. We sort of orchestrated this ahead of time, and he's reminding me where I'm supposed to go next. So thank you. Okay, so before I leave Kim completely, the pump, P-U-M-P, portable upcycling machine for plastic. So, wishing her luck there. All right, so we're back. I mentioned in the other gallery we looked at a couple of large pieces by fore Vandeveld. These are a little bit different variety of Fore's work. This is a triptych called Code in Fog 1, 2, and 3. These, and we're going to look at a couple down the way here in a minute, these are not 3D printed, but they are laser cut. I believe, fairly common materials. We're looking at felt, we're looking at industrial webbing, but being laser cut, she assures me that you get one chance at it, and if it doesn't work, you've lost it. So it's a very specific technical consideration, scientific consideration, laser cutter, that she has put into the service of making art, colorful, geometric in this case. We'll see a couple other examples down the way, but right now I want to transition again to a different, again I mentioned fore early on. I mentioned fore was very interested in light and color. Here we are looking at exactly that with these light boxes. There are art historical references to the color field painters of the mid-20th century, later 20th century. They reference that. But they reference the sort of tension between color and light. And I just think they're wonderful, they're lovely to look at, very creative, and she's done a whole series of these, and they're all beautiful. It was hard to pick which three we're going to put in. So, for Vandeveld, again, a little more here of her textiles. Again, looking at common materials, duck canvas, webbing. Again, laser cut, you make a mistake, you start over, you lose the piece. Duck canvas, shock cord, this is elastic cord, arranged in colorful and asymmetric yet very balanced. All the things that you look for in a work of art, color, shape, texture, rhythm, balance. All of these artists are working with all those tools, all of those considerations. And this is the last piece by Fore that we're going to look at, called Skipper 1 and 2. It's a diptych. Again, laser cut, common materials, duck canvas and felt, in the service of very colorful art making. Okay, now for a little change of pace. You may be familiar with 3D printing. And we're going to talk about that. 3D printing kind of everywhere. 3D printed. The padding on the inside of this football helmet. 3D printed. I have a younger brother who has been a successful football coach during his career, retired, moved into officiating football, and in his spare time sells football equipment for this company. And I mentioned to him that I'm doing this exhibition and it's going to have a part of 3D printing in it. And he's like, 3D printing? Wait a minute. Stop the presses. He goes to his car, gets this out of his trunk and says, this helmet is 3D printed, the padding in this. And if you could, and I don't expect you will, but if you could see the patterns that are created in what they've done here, you can begin to feel confident that the injuries in football, the head injuries in football, are being well considered and taken care of. It's very intricate and state of the art. So, state of the art, 3D printing. We're here with the work of Jackie Brown. Jackie teaches at Bowdoin in the visual arts, and she works in ceramics. This is generally high fire clay, porcelain, which is a very high fire clay, and she incorporates a lot of 3D printing. I think if you're not familiar with how that might work with art, with clay in particular, she's given us here what she calls a wall grid, and these are what I would sort of consider to be the beginning steps of the three-dimensional sculpture that you can see on the pedestals or materials such as this, which is created via computer, 3D printing. This is the shape I want. You sort of put in what you need, and you can see that it sort of comes out. I think this is a great sort of cross-section of how a piece is constructed, how 3D clay production does work. And she's got a variety of shapes, textures, and colors here, but this is sort of these would be the building blocks of what will then become something like this. A wall sculpture called from her Aggregate series. And while we're talking about 3D printing, there's also within that context, there's a lot of hand building that goes on with this. So again, high tech, high touch. If you can, I don't know if you can see the sort of texture of rope that's in here. A couple different, there's sort of cable here, rope here. These are done with a plaster mold made of real rope. She takes the rope out, injects liquid clay called slip into that mold, and is then able to come up with malleable pieces of clay that are still workable, shapeable, and she just sort of combines that with some of the 3D printed stuff into these giant wall arrangements, which again, shape, color, texture, rhythm, pattern, all the things you look for in a work of art. In this case, three-dimensional. Just really exciting stuff. And I know that her students at Bowdoin love the work she does, love working with her. She's a great teacher. I think she was the last artist that I did a studio visit with before studio visits sort of went away. And she has a lovely big studio at Bowdoin. While I was there, I was a little bit envious because she had some larger individual pieces, larger work that was actually in the process of getting ready to be shipped to an exhibition at Smith College in Massachusetts. But I'm so pleased with what I was able to get that I don't miss it at all. We've got these lovely pieces on pedestals, three-dimensionally printed, these sort of collages that kind of grow on the wall. Just really happy to be able to have Jackie in this exhibition. She's a multi-talented artist in the sense, and I don't really want to take the time, and I don't have the expertise to be able to talk about this, but let me just ask the question, and think before you answer. Does sculpture need to be three-dimensional? And that's the question she's asking. This is the first of a new series. And Reggie, I don't know how close you can actually get on this image, but it's an image that takes several minutes. It sort of starts back and then closes in, and you are convinced that you are looking at a 3D, that a representation of a three-dimensional object, when in fact this is all computer generated, but you'll see that there's refraction going on with some of the elements and flashes of light reflecting off different facets. And part of what intrigues her about this is that it's free of the context of size. In other words, it might be a microbe, might be a meteor. So she loves that sort of give and take of what's real, what's not, and dares to ask the question, does sculpture really need to be three-dimensional? The easy answer is yes, but the more you think about it, and the more you look at this, it may be not such a black and white question. Okay. Lastly, the artist Elizabeth Bush, whom I've mentioned earlier. These are a couple pieces that, again, acrylic paint on fabric, sort of collaged with other textile elements. And Elizabeth likes to talk about the fact that all of her works really stem from incidents in her life. So they're very sort of soul-worthy in the sense that she's really interpreting some of the things that happened to her during the course of her lifetime. And these reflect that, and she feels that whether people know the real story or not, they're sort of touched by the fact that that's where it comes from. So this is a piece called Masks, Fair Game. And again, collage with a lot of fabric, collage elements in the fabric, painted. Some of these were pre-printed. I believe these here, she said to me, were pre-printed fabrics that she wanted to work in. There's actually, and I don't think you're going to be able to see it, but there's actually an incision right here and a little bit of a surprise. I don't want to touch the work, but there's a different sort of image or pattern underneath here that's kind of shrouded in mystery. But it's just so colorful and dynamic. I just love her work. And with this piece and then with this one in particular, don't look at this one for too long, it might make you dizzy. But this is a piece called Transition. And it might look like there are three-dimensional pieces here. They might not look three-dimensional, they might look two-dimensional. And they might change. Thus, the title Transition, at least for me. It may have a particularly different meaning for her. But they're just so well fabricated and so beautifully painted. And you know, the composition, you've got this large circle here, ostensibly in the background of these orbs that are projecting forward. Transition could be color transitions, cool colors to warm colors, shapes from small to large. There's a lot going on in this painting, in this quilt that was painted. The way some of the stitching, you've got these circle shapes, but then in the stitching you've got rectangles and squares, and there's just a lot going on here. And I was just so pleased to be able to borrow this piece called Transition. So, we have seen everything in the show. I want to thank you for joining us this evening. Thanks again to Reggie for being the cameraman, directing this whole thing, to John and Kelly for letting me do this show in the first place. Interestingly, I pitched a whole different show to them about a year ago, and then that show wasn't going to happen. And I said, well, how about this one? I wanted to do this for a while, and they jumped right at it. And I'm very pleased with all the support that I've received here from the gallery. Roy and Dean were fantastic. Diamond, who runs the website, great job. It's been a great pleasure both working with the gallery people and working with the artists. It was a great experience. I hope if you get a chance to visit this exhibition that you'll enjoy it. My sort of fail-safe all the way through was, well, even if it sort of doesn't work conceptually, there's going to be some cool stuff to look at. And that's kind of how I see it. So thank you for joining us, and whatever questions you might have, fire away.
Yeah, I just want to say we've had some, whether it's a Facebook issue or internet issue, there's been some start and stop. So we will have a clean version of this on the website and on YouTube. So that may have impeded some questions a bit, but it has been running pretty smoothly as of late. So I think we're okay. But I guess one question is so this concept of adding arts to STEM to create STEAM. To what extent do you think artists adopting sort of these high-tech approaches aids in that sort of endeavor, such as artists incorporating 3D printing or upcycling or using video media aids in sort of that endeavor to get arts incorporated?
Interesting. Well, the idea, of course, of STEAM, I mean, it's not starting now. It started a long time ago. Probably the same day STEM started. Artists were like, what? It was interesting, and in fact, I do want to just give a quick note to whether you read labels or not. I did ask each of the 7 artists in this exhibition the same question: how do you feel your art relates to STEM education? And the answers were sort of all over the board, but it just seemed like a natural progression, that they're looking for tools to make art, and 3D printing allows them to make a different kind of art, or make art in a different way. So they're looking for tools. Vandeveld had a really nice statement, something about how can an artist use technology to be able to think in creative ways. And I'm paraphrasing poorly there, but it was just a very nice statement about it. Sort of seemed a natural progression from what I was receiving for information from these artists. It was like, no big deal. It's a tool. So I hope that answers the question. But yeah, I must say it wasn't this. Oh well, gee, I had to go back to school to learn how to do this so that I could, make a pot. No, it was about, oh gee, I'm doing this, and if I try that machine over there, I can do what I'm doing even better, or easier, or differently. And it sort of raises the bar for each of these artists, but it doesn't seem to be totally giant step for them. It's a natural progression.
And then obviously with the title of the show, there's a natural tie-in to education. And a good number of the artists in the show are also educators. So what would you want viewers to learn having come seeing the exhibition?
I think my opening premise was about, STEM is a great tool, a great outlook. It sort of needed to be quantified so that the funds could be raised to support science, technology, engineering, and math, because studies were showing in education that America was sort of falling behind the rest of the world in some of these disciplines. So that's sort of where the idea came from. I don't know that I can answer it beyond that. Just the people don't live in ivory towers. You're not only a scientist. You're not only an engineer. You're not only an artist. You live in this world. You've got a lot of different interests and backgrounds, and as sort of wherever you go, and certain things take you in certain ways. It's just the nature of the beast, I guess.
And what, if anything, do you feel you learned in putting together this exhibition?
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
In terms of keeping on the education theme, what, if anything, do you feel you learned in putting together this exhibition, from the initial concept to finding the artist and then the actual work?
That's really what I learned, is that it was no big deal. I expected that it would be. I expected, artists are up in arms about it, or, my first personal reaction or professional reaction as a museum educator was, well, how can you not include art in this equation? But then to talk to the artists about it, it's like, well, yeah, I'm using computers and I'm using 3D printers and I'm using laser cutters and using advanced materials or techniques to expand their own art making. And it was surprising. What I learned was it was no big deal for the artists. There's no camp up in arms about how come art is so separate. It's not. They include it. They work with it. It's an organic thing. Artists adapt. If it's out there, they're going to find a way to use it.
That's an excellent lesson. I think that's it for the questions. We've got a lot of comments here complimenting you on your curation and the show.
Nice to hear. Thank you.
And people being really inspired by it. So.
Thanks, Dad.
Oh yeah, that is the same last name. But yeah, so thank you. This has been great.
It was my pleasure. I really enjoyed putting the show together. It's been a great experience all around. So thanks to you guys too. Thank you.